Hello everyone and happy Friday. I'm Nitzahon, and each and every week I bring you a new Magic the Gathering Top 10 list. Today we're looking at a keyword ability, Indestructible. First introduced in Mirrodin block, Indestructible is a pretty powerful ability as it makes it so a creature cannot be killed in the easiest ways, by destroy effects or by damage. Indestructible permanents aren't immune to everything though. Exile effects as well as cards that shrink their toughness can take them down. Still, cards with Indestructible have made a big mark in Magic because they are so inherently powerful. In today's top 10, we're looking at the 10 cards in Magic's history that either have Indestructible or give things Indestructible. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score these lists. Cards receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s they've received, with a Pro Tour top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix top 8. The cards are then arranged numbers 10 through 1, with the highest score being found at number 1. I consider Legacy Championships and Vintage Championship events as Pro Tour top 8s, so that those formats can be properly represented in the scores of the cards. Now, let's get started. At number 10, we have a god, and one thing has been true about all gods in Magic so far: they're indestructible. Erebos is no different. Another thing true of gods is that they make you jump through some hoops before they're willing to do anything as a creature, and Erebos is no different there either, asking you to have a certain amount of devotion to black. Once you get your devotion high enough, you have a very large 5/7, but even before you get your devotion where it needs to be, he offers a very useful couple of abilities. He makes it so your opponent can't gain life, and he can draw you cards for a couple mana and 2 life. His ability sort of helps fuel him, since the more cards you draw, the more likely you are to have enough devotion to get him online. Luckily for him, and a little bit because of him, Mono Black Devotion was one of the stronger decks in the Standard of his time, with Grey Merchant of Asphodel and Erebos at its center. And while he picked up one Pro Tour top 8 in Theros block constructed in a black-blue-green control deck, in Standard he appeared almost exclusively in Devotion to Black decks, with a few appearances in Dimir and Orzhov Devotion decks too. He's never seen play at the Premier level since he rotated out of Standard, but is obviously still a staple in EDH, so at least he sees play somewhere. At number 9, we have Boros Charm. Like all charms, Boros Charm offers you some choices. The one used most frequently with this one is doing 4 damage, as it mostly appears in burn decks. But making permanents indestructible doesn't go unused either, and is quite useful against board sweeping effects like Anger of the Gods, which are often cited in against burn decks. The flexibility of charms is always nice, and it has allowed the card to have a pretty good resume. It picked up its first Pro Tour top 8 at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, the Block Pro Tour, where it appeared in a Boros deck wins deck. It had a good time in Standard too, appearing primarily in aggressive Naya and Boros decks that are sometimes called aggro and sometimes called burn. In Modern, it has primarily found success in burn decks of various types, whether Naya or Boros, and it continues to see regular play there. At number 8, we have Selfless Spirit, a card that's still in Standard on this list. A 2-mana 2/1 flyer is a nice aggressive cost, but it can also sacrifice itself and utilize an ability that is a huge problem for opponents to deal with. It gives the whole team Indestructible. This means that it dodges all board sweeping that doesn't exile or give -X/-X to creatures. In Standard, it combos a little bit with Avacyn, where you could sacrifice him in response to your Avacyn's transformation trigger, and he could save the rest of your creatures. It was also a nice card to hit off of Collected Company, because if your opponent played a board sweeper, you could search this guy up and protect your board, and that's where he got his start in Standard in Collected Company decks. Spirit decks also became a thing in Standard for a while, thanks to the existence of Spellqueller primarily, and Selfless Spirit made it into those decks as well. A little more recently, a blue-white flash deck has emerged that plays like an aggro control deck and plays a bunch of low-costed flyers with upside, many of which have flash, though not the Selfless Spirit. It has also found its way into some versions of Mardu vehicles. The Spirit's impact has also already been felt in Modern, where it has appeared in Elf decks, which are notoriously weak to cards like Pyroclasm, so having a card like Selfless Spirit helps defend against that, as well as in Hate Bear decks. But the deck it has done the most in Standard or in Modern is Collected Company, where it serves the role of being a very good creature you can search up as a utility creature. Since the Spirit is still in Standard and already making its presence felt in Modern, there is no telling how high he will climb up on this list. At number 7, we have Valorous Stance. It isn't quite a charm, but it is a moto spell, giving you the option to kill a big creature or give one of your guys Indestructible. Similar to the charm we just looked at, the destroying a big creature was probably chosen most often, but keeping a creature alive who is going to win you the game on the next turn in response to an opponent's removal is also something this card did a lot of. It was a staple when it was in Standard, appearing somewhere in the 75 of many decks that had white in them. In its early days in Standard, this was primarily Abzan decks, but it later included Collected Company decks and Jeskai Dragons, and the Indestructible effect in Jeskai Dragons was even better because you would be saving a massive dragon that you had in play. It has managed a lone Modern Grand Prix top 8 at Grand Prix Charlotte in 2016, appearing as a one-of in the sideboard of a Zoo deck. I have my doubts that it finds any consistent success in Modern, but hey, it managed one Grand Prix top 8 there. Maybe it has more in its future. At number 6, we have Elspeth Knight Errant, a good example for what a powerful planeswalker looks like. She comes into play with a high loyalty for her mana cost. She can protect herself while increasing her loyalty by creating soldier tokens. If you have plenty of protection, she can also increase her loyalty by sending your creatures to the sky much larger. And she had what usually amounts to a game-ending ultimate ability, and that she makes all of your permanents indestructible. The last part is what gets her on this particular list. In Standard, she appeared in a variety of decks, Kithkins and black-white tokens probably being the most consistent to run her, but also appearing in various Bant mid-range decks. Her most dominant showing in Standard was at Pro Tour Kyoto in 2009, where she appeared in 4 of the top 8 decks. She wasn't relegated to Standard either. She also managed 3 Pro Tour top 8s and 2 Grand Prix top 8s in Extended for the few years that the format still existed after she was printed, appearing in Doran, the Siege Tower decks, and White Weenie decks, among others. Once Extended ended and Modern was created, she continued to see play, showing up in Zoo decks, Blue-White Control, and multicolored good stuff Planeswalker decks. She has even proven powerful enough to see play in Legacy, primarily in Miracles and Maverick. However, she hasn't seen play in any format since 2010, and she hasn't been a part of any major decks in either Modern or Legacy for a while now, but there's always a chance she gets another shot. At number 5, we have a card that only has Indestructible once it transforms, but that's no small thing. Westvale Abbey and Ormondal have appeared on an MTG top 10 a few times before, coming in at the number 1 spot in the Demons list and number 6 on the list with Lifelink. Here they are number 5, which is pretty good for a card that's still in Standard. As a land, Westvale Abbey has a leg up, as basically any deck that plans on putting a bunch of creatures into play in Standard is interested in running the Abbey. In the early game, it produces mana just like any other land, but in the late game, it turns into an incredibly difficult to deal with creature who provides 18 points of life swing with just 1 hit. The decks that have run him in Standard are exactly those decks that run a ton of creatures or ways to make creature tokens, such as Selesnya tokens, Abzan Company, Golgari Aristocrats, and White Weenie, and more recently the Azorius Flash decks. The Abbey also has a lone Modern Grand Prix top 8, and because there is so little downside in including this card in your deck, I imagine we'll see more of it in the future, even after it rotates. At number 4, we have Fleecemane Lion. A 2-mana 3/3 is already a great rate, but it also comes with Monstrosity, which in its case puts a +1/+1 counter on it, but most importantly gives it hexproof and Indestructible. Those 2 words together make the Lion one of the hardest creatures to kill in all of Magic once it's become monstrous. Only sacrifice effects and board sweeping effects of -4/-4 or greater can take it down. The Lion was great because you could just play a huge, efficient creature for 2, and in the later part of the game it becomes an even bigger problem for the opponent. Fleecemane Lion first saw play in Theros Block Constructed and Pro Tour Journey into Nyx, which incidentally was also the last Block Constructed Pro Tour. He got top 8s in a Constellation deck and a Junk deck, which was basically just a good stuff deck. He saw a ton of play in Standard, though. In the beginning of its time in Standard, it was in all manner of aggro decks to happen to be running green-white as the best 2-drop in the deck and maybe in the format. This included Naya aggro and Selesnya aggro primarily. Then, after the printing of Seed Rhino and Anafenza in Khans of Tarkir, Fleecemane Lion was a nice fit for the Abzan deck too. So unlike some cards that end up losing ground when the metagame changes with the printing of a new set, Fleecemane Lion just kept on rolling. The Lion has never seen play outside of Blocker Standard, and it is unlikely that it ever will, so it will probably have the cards behind it pull ahead of it in the near future. At number 3, we have one of the original Indestructible cards, and that is Darksteel Citadel. The idea of printing an Indestructible artifact land that produces colorless mana seems innocuous, but it turned out that Darksteel Citadel, along with the artifact lands that can produce colored mana in Mirrodin, were all pretty busted, in large part because of the affinity mechanic, which in a way resulted in all of these artifact lands turning into a 0-mana Soul Ring, meaning they basically produce 2 mana. In Block, the brokenness of the card was quickly apparent, with it snatching 5 of the top 8 spots at Pro Tour Kobe in 2004. In Standard, it was also pretty good. By the way, it got banned out of Block immediately after that Pro Tour, Darksteel Citadel along with the other artifact lands and Arcbound Ravager. In Standard, it stayed legal for a little bit longer, though it only managed a couple of World's top 8s and 3 Grand Prix top 8s before Affinity was banned out of that format as well. Affinity continued to exist in Extended, though, and the Citadel was played there, though it only managed a couple of Pro Tour top 8s. Modern would prove to be the best format for the Citadel, where it still sees play in the modern version of Affinity, which, curiously enough, usually plays 0 cards that have Affinity, but the deck still cares about having artifacts in play, and the Citadel does that while also producing mana for you. More recently, Darksteel Citadel actually put up a couple new Standard Pro Tour top 8s after it was reprinted in Magic 2015. This is because it was also printed alongside Insoul Artifact, and you could put Insoul Artifact on your Darksteel Citadel and have a 5/5 indestructible creature with haste on turn 2, basically. The creature would be tapped, but technically it could attack if it was untapped. But the point is, it's had a couple runs through Standard, and in its second one, it was also successful. And at number 2, we have another card still legal in Standard, and that is Archangel Avacyn. The moment she was spoiled, it was clear that she would see a lot of play. Basically, every block has at least one crazy pushed angel, and Avacyn is the one here. 5 mana for a 4/4 with flash, flying, and vigilance that makes your board indestructible when it comes into play is already good enough. But once another non-angel dies, she does 3 to the whole board. She sees play in most decks that can cast her, at least in the sideboard, and she hasn't ceased seeing play since she was printed. When she first came out, she was in Bant Company decks and Selesnya token decks. When those decks rotated out, she moved to Orzhov Control, Blue-White Flash, and most recently to Mardu Vehicle and Mardu Ballista decks. Her play rate has actually gone down a little bit when the Crazy Cat Lady combo was legal, because Avacyn was a little too slow, but with the combo now banished from Standard, I think it's likely we see more of her before she rotates out. Despite all of her power, Avacyn has not been able to transition to any other formats, though I do think the power level might be there, and she could see play in Modern someday. And at number 1, we have Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Yeah, the dude has been dominant in Standard. Dominant enough to be the most played card ever, with Indestructible somewhere in the text box. We all know Gideon, and he has seen play consistently ever since he was printed, never missing a single Pro Tour top 8 in that time. But I think he may have a Grand Prix top 8 at every single Standard Grand Prix since he was printed, too. He is an incredibly good Planeswalker. He can put 2/2 tokens into play to protect himself, allowing him to produce more tokens, or he can turn himself into a 5/5 indestructible creature, and his emblem gives you an emblem that gives you an Anthem effect. If a deck has white in it, Gideon is somewhere in the deck. If it's not in the main board, it's in the sideboard. You don't need me to tell you how ubiquitous he is. He has been such a mainstay in Standard that there have been multiple rumors he will be banned. And while we have had 2 waves of Standard bannings, which is something we hadn't seen in years, Gideon has been left untouched, and in fact, I think he'll become even better in this new post-ban world. You don't need me to read off every single kind of deck he's been in. Let's just leave it at all of them with white in them in Standard. He's even started showing up in Modern too, picking up top 8s in Collected Company, Abzan, and Junk decks, and his power level is high enough for him to continue to see play there. That does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. In the comments, let me know ideas for future top 10s you'd like to see, and if you want to catch more of my top 10s, subscribe both here and to the Ether Hub. My content is sponsored by 5colorcombo.com, a great website for all things Magic. One of the coolest things they have is a store with amazing playmats and creature tokens. You can use my discount code NITZAHONE5 there to get a 5% discount. Thanks for watching.